Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. We will wait a few minutes for our last minute attendees to jump into the webinar. But again, thank you all for taking the time to jump on today. Attendees are slowly trickling in, which is great. Sean, I like your Zoom photo that you have. Hello from Singapore. Thank you for joining us.
I love Singapore.
Did you say you love Singapore, Lee?
I love Singapore. I lived in Singapore for about 18 months and the food is amazing. The people are amazing too.
Now I want some noodles.
Yeah, agreed. I was going to say you got us hungry here lunchtime in Eastern. And hi, Connie from
in Singapore, where there's just like these little booths that just have different kinds of food, right? So you can just sit there and eat all day if you wanted to. But, there was this Malaysian place that made some type of pork dish that if I go back to Singapore, that's like as soon as I get off the airplane, I'm going there.
Awesome. All right. We'll give everyone one more minute to jump into the webinar here. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. We're very excited to have you here to discuss virtual selling and what it has been like to really be selling in a completely virtual atmosphere for the past 2 years. I can't believe COVID has been happening for that long. We've been working from home for quite some time, but we are very excited to jump into some of the details from our expert panelists today. Before we get started, I will quickly introduce myself. My name is Kayla. I'm a Senior Solutions Engineer at AlayaCare and one of our pre-sales ambassadors. I'm really excited to be hosting the webinar this afternoon. Before we jump into the content, as always, we want to thank you for joining us today and making all that we do at the PreSales Collective possible. We wouldn't really be able to enable the pre-sales role and tell people about the best job that really no one's ever heard of before they jump into the pre-sales role without each and every one of you. So again, thank you so much for making that possible today and throughout all of your engagements with the PreSales Collective. In order to get the most out of today's webinar, as Kevin mentioned in the chat, please feel free to ask questions in the Q&A function. Be active in the chat. You will be muted as a participant in the webinar, but we still want to hear from you. So again, feel free to use the chat in order to communicate with us in the Q&A box as you have questions throughout the webinar so that we're able to take those during our Q&A portion towards the end of our discussion today. We're also going to be launching a quick poll to allow you to tell us a little bit more about yourself and what is the role that currently best describes your role at your organization. So I'll give you about 30 seconds to answer that particular poll while we begin to jump in. I always look forward to seeing what the results are of these polls every time that we run a webinar. It's interesting to see the different roles that join for the specific topics that we're discussing. This one is absolutely universal to each. So it looks like we have a lot of individual contributors joining us today and quite a few pre-sales managers, directors, or VPs. So thank you so much again for taking the time to jump on. As we mentioned, we are going to be chatting virtual selling today. So what does that look like? How has it really changed over the past 2 years? And what is the evolving atmosphere? Before we jump into the questions with our panelists, I'm going to pass it off to them to allow you to give a quick introduction about yourself and really why you've joined the PreSales Collective. So Sean, we'll start with you, then we'll pass it off to Lee and end off with Damon.
Thanks, Kayla. Hi, I'm Sean Carolan, and I'm the head of pre-sales at Instruct. I live in Austin, Texas with my wife, daughter, and 2 cats. My responsibilities include building and presenting technical demos, helping new prospects and users learn how to use our technology, along with some evangelism and blogging. In my past life, I was a system administrator, but I gave up the cubicle and pager back in 2014 for a life on the road as a sales engineer.
That's awesome. Thanks, Sean.
I like that bit about giving up the pager.
Me too.
I love when I had my two-way. It was something that I wanted to have, but I didn't want to have it once I got it. So hello, everyone. I'm Lee Johnson, and I am the Director of Sales Engineering for VirtuStream, which is a Dell Technologies business. I've been in pre-sales since 2015. This was actually my first sales engineering job as an individual contributor. And prior to that, I was in consulting, in particular in the SAP space, which afforded me the opportunity to travel the world and implement SAP solutions in the likes of Singapore, South Africa. I was there for 2.5 years. Today, I reside in Northern Virginia with my wife and children. My hobby is real estate and investing in financials and all things of that sort. I'm happy to be here and looking forward to having a great conversation with you all today.
Great. Thank you so much, Lee. And Damon, to finish us off.
Yeah, thank you, Kayla. Lee, I might hit you up for some investing tips in the real estate market. You know, we're always looking to learn a bit. So I'm Damon Miller. I am the VP of Field Engineering at solo.io. I live in sunny Windham, New Hampshire, and that's usually an exaggeration, but today it actually is kind of sunny. It's a little windy. There's still a little bit of snow on the ground, but it's warming up this part of the world, which is quite nice. I am responsible for both pre and post sales at Solo. You know, our field engineering group covers the pre-sales, traditional, you know, sales engineering type work, as well as support, implementation, customer success. And I've been in pre-sales, this is terrifying to say, but probably 20 years, maybe 21 at this point. I'm old, so bear with me if I'm slow. So thanks everyone for attending.
You're only as old as you feel.
All right. So 85 then it is.
Even better, Damon. Awesome. Well, thank you all again for taking the time to join us. As we mentioned, virtual selling has changed so much over the past 2 years. So our first question is, how would you define virtual selling? And we will start with Sean and then pass it to Damon and finish off this question with a response from Lee.
Thanks, Kayla. So we might think of virtual reality headsets and doing sales demos in the metaverse. But my definition of virtual selling is much more simple. It's any sales activity that happens without a face-to-face in-person meeting. So in a sense, we've kind of had virtual selling since around the 1950s when telemarketing really began to take off. And you know, the telephone was invented in 1876. It's this new technology, but no one really knows how to use it yet. You know, for the earliest years of telephone usage, people didn't really know what to say when they picked it up. You know, and so that there were competing greetings. Hello won out in the end, but my favorite was Alexander Graham Bell, who liked ahoy. It never really caught on. Anyway, it takes some time. When a new technology appears, you know, sales over the phone didn't really take off until the 1950s. And that was when the first telemarketing call center was created. So you can thank them for those calls you get about your car insurance. expiring. So I feel like we're at another inflection point where enterprise sales is starting to use newer technologies such as teleconferencing, remote demos, and hands-on labs. And that was, of course, accelerated by the global pandemic. So to summarize, I'd say virtual selling is the use of technology to conduct sales meetings and demos without having to be in the same physical space as your prospect.
Yeah, I'll kind of add on to that. I mean, obviously, I think that captures, the essence of what we're all doing, these days. Though I think mercifully, we're starting to see a bit of in-person activity, though it tends to happen later in the sales process. So, I mean, yeah, virtual selling is really the process of establishing a meaningful connection, with people without being in person, with them. So, that, as Sean said, we've done this for reasons of efficiency for quite some time. Demos, initial discovery calls, typically, over the past, I don't know, 10 years for me or so, have been remote, though occasionally you'll get the giant opportunity that, you want to be in person. But yeah, for me, it's really finding a way to establish a meaningful connection with people, again, without being, with them in person. And I think, we've all learned how to do that in our personal lives over the years. But now I think the pandemic accelerated this, but that was already well underway prior to COVID. So I think, now it's more finding a balance, how to build those connections with people, but then sort of parlay them into meaningful momentum and shorten the cycles, as a result of not being able to be in person. So that's my assessment.
Wow. I don't know if, I could add much to what Sean and Damon have already stated, right? Because they've landed this 747 pretty well. I like to have a little bit of a different twist on what it is that I'm doing. I'm not selling, right? I'm doing virtual relationship building, right? Because one of the things that I see myself as is not really as a seller, pre-sales, and all of these different type of monikers that we give ourselves. What I see is myself as a relationship builder and a problem solver, right? So I tend to spend my day with customers who have a problem that my company and our solution can solve, right? But I understand that there's layers that I have to go through in order to be able to solve that problem for them. And that's where the relationship building comes into play. And I would say what virtual selling has done is it has allowed for me to be in more places in a week. Rather than, prior to the pandemic, I was in 2 or 3 cities in a week. And now I can touch 10, 15 different customers in a week. And I can foster that relationship building. And as I work my way up to that trusted advisor quadrant.
That's a good way to put it, Lee. I like that. You're sort of more efficient. You can touch more opportunities. Cool.
I could be in Memphis this morning, and I could be in New Hampshire hanging out with you, Damon, playing with the snow in
Anytime.
the afternoon. And guess what? I didn't have to leave my house. So, it's always about, for me, enhancing that relationship, because in my world, well, with all of this technology, people still buy from people, right? People still buy from people, and that requires that relationship to be built.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really like, Sean, what you said, that virtual selling has been around for decades. We just weren't referring to it as virtual selling at that time. And it really leads us nicely into our next point of how has the state of virtual selling really changed in the past 2 years since we've been in the global pandemic? And Sean, I'll let you kick us off there, and then Lee can finalize that question.
I want to hand it to Lee. Lee, you go first.
Well, how has it changed, right? Now, I have to be more accommodating to the fact that people are going to be distracted, right? So there was a point in time where I would go into a room and I would lock the door, and I knew that I had a captive audience for 1 to 2 hours, right? But one of the things that we had to do is we had to adjust our mode of operation. I can remember when my 4-year-old and my 8-year-old was at home, and there would be all kinds of noise going on in the house, right? So I also have to understand that my customer, right, they're also experiencing many of the same things, right? They're multitasking while they're at home, right? Most of us are now back in school and things of that sort. So life is so normalized just a bit. But I would say in the very beginning was you knew that you would have distractions of a cat going across the desk or a child walking up behind, and you had to be empathetic to know that, hey, I need to take a pause and make sure that the messaging that I'm communicating at that time is being transferred over to the audience that I have. So one of the things is that I would have to slow down my conversation. I would have to ask more questions as to, are you understanding? Are you following me? Do we need to pause right here and unpack this just a little bit more? And one of the things that I miss about being in the room is being able to read those bodies, right? I could really look at, if I see a face and someone pulls back or something like that, is something that I can't experience while I'm on Zoom as we are today. That's one of the things that I miss, and one of the reasons why I would be happy to get back into the room with my customer is so that I can read that body language to be able to further along in that experience.
I think we have a lot in common, Lee. That's why I wanted you to go first, because there's some overlap between our answers. So yeah, wow, what a 2 years it's been. I was just looking at the calendar this morning and thinking about my last business trip. It was for a conference, and I was doing so much travel before the pandemic hit. Of course, we had Zoom, and teleconferencing back then, but it was never the primary means to make a deal, right? To do business with the customer. And sometimes we would travel 24 hours or more, and end up way out in the middle of Arkansas or Oklahoma to visit the prospect face to face in their office. And you know what? They loved it. There's really no substitute for meeting someone in person, face to face, eating with them, touring their office. And when you're in the same room with someone, it's so much easier to communicate and fewer distractions. But, as we know, all that came to a crashing halt. And I went from 100% travel to 0 in a short span of a week. And this really put us in a pickle at the place I was working at the time, because we had 25 or 30 workshops planned. It was like a field marketing roadshow in all the major cities in North America. And so field marketing was panicking. They had no idea what to do, because they, booked all these venues and people were registered for these events and excited to come to these events. And we had to pivot very quickly to virtual events. Fortunately, our workshops were already cloud-based, and so it wasn't too hard to retool things and switch to a Zoom-based delivery. So I think one of the main things that's changed over the last 2 years is just the acceptance of the medium. It takes a long time to get used to a new technology and for it to become really normal. Like I mentioned with the telephone, in 1974. There was a video phone developed by a Dutch company called the Beeldtelefoon. It actually means video telephone, right? And it had a camera, and then you could do screen sharing. You can look it up. It's on Wikipedia. But you could turn the camera down and show your desktop, right? You can draw and show off diagrams. This is 1974, but still, it took till 2020 to really become a thing and not just something you see in like a sci-fi movie, So I don't know. I think just the mainstream acceptance got accelerated a bit, that maybe we won't go all virtual. We all want to get back to being in person, but it's going to be a large part of our sales strategy moving forward.
Sean, I'm sorry to interrupt, Kayla. I just wanted to say that, Sean, you've been enamored with the Dutch for some time now. When I talked to Sean about a month ago, he sent me a list of inventions from the Dutch, which was quite impressive, by the way. So thank you for the lesson.
Yeah, it's my first time working for a Dutch company. Our headquarters is in the Netherlands. So yeah. It does make some interesting time delays, right? They're several hours ahead of us.
Well, we're going to get a history lesson for sure with Sean. And one of the things that I could appreciate when I came into my role is I found a book, to your point, Sean, that called Compute as a Utility. And guess what? This book was written in 1964.
Wow.
Right? And all of a sudden, we thought that cloud was something that was new, but someone thought about it a long time ago. But what that says is the thought was there, and all of these metaverse concepts and things of that sort are coming from books that Elon Musk and Matt Zuckerberg read as children. And now they're being realized. But what happens is there's a lag with the technology coming up to par with reality, right? So I was talking to a colleague and I said, rather than talk to somebody who's thinking about the future today, go read one of those old books and you'll feel like a Jedi master when you're talking to people, because you're like, oh, this was a concept that was there from 1964. And they're like, really? I love it.
Lee, we can nerd out on computer history
I'm
anytime.
calling you right after this, brother.
Okay. And I think we should also mention that in honor of International Women's Month, Ada Lovelace, the first computer programmer who was so amazing, she was writing code before the computer existed. How about that?
So interesting. Agreed. We have so many tips. So Lee, we're going to for real estate advice. Sean, in case you need Dutch inventions, Damon will have to find yours later on in this webinar. So we look forward to that. All right. Our next question is surrounding how you stay on top of all of the changes that are really happening within this atmosphere, and what are the key things to look for in the industry and know really when it's time to change, and how do you really stay on the cutting edge while still being authentic and, like you said, Lee, maintaining those relationships, building them, having empathy for the customers and prospects that you're speaking with. So Damon, we'll kick it off with you and then I'll pass it over to Lee.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you, Kayla. So this one, honestly, I'll probably take the easy answer because I can't possibly know everything there is to know about every industry, every facet, et cetera. So I listen to customers and I listen to what people are saying, and that's guided me over the years. Back in, I was an IT person way back. I studied electrical engineering and, found out that what you like as a hobby might not make a great job. So if anyone's had that experience, it happens. So I got into IT because it was simple and straightforward, something I just done, and that sort of led me to exposure to this whole world that I hadn't really, understood. And so, I saw this pain from a bunch of people around automation. Back in those days, there was no Ansible, Chef, Puppet, et cetera. We talked about data center automation and config management as kind of new concepts in the data center. And so that led me to a company called Blade Logic, which, again, I had listened to the sort of pain and, listened to customers, going forward, which led me to a series of other opportunities. So yeah, I'm fascinated by what makes people tick and kind of what challenges they have. And so I'll ask a bunch of questions in a way that I hope is disarming, because I really am interested in what people have to say. So that's kind of what I think has informed me, in my career. When it's time to make a change, this one's harder to acknowledge, I think, but easier to sort of what's the word? Recognize in some sense. So authenticity, you mentioned, that term, and for me, it's really important. And I think one of the attendees, referenced empathy. So, when I start feeling like I'm not being authentic, like in my gut, I know, hey, Damon, you're not energized anymore. You're not excited about this opportunity. And more to the point in an industry sense, you're not passionate about what you're selling or the product you're suggesting or the solution you're offering. That's the indication for me. I mean, there are opportunities come your way all the time, but the hard part is sort of knowing when you are ready for a change and kind of knowing yourself. That's sort of a lifelong challenge for all of us, I think. But for me, when I notice that in myself, I think, well, do I need to make a change in my current role? Is there some org suggestion I need to make, or do I need to make a bigger change? So and then last, you talked about how do you stay cutting edge. I look at the developer community for this, and I'm at a company now called Solo.io in the service mesh space, and I won't make this an advertisement, but I've long wanted an opportunity to be closer to the developers. And our CEO I've known for some time, Adit, she's awesome, and it was just a real opportunity for me to work with her and be closer to the developer community, because they'll guide you as well. Where there are swarms of activity and tons of commits, etc. In GitHub, they'll help guide you in that regard. So perhaps that's a little different than sort of training and certifications, but that's what guides me.
Wow. You have me coming behind these two geniuses, and it's going to be hard to, get something that sticks. But one of the things that I would say is mindset, right? Your mindset, and I'm going to go as to what mindset is to me, right? Mindset is both your conscious and your unconscious, right? Right. And Carol Dweck has a book called Mindset, where she talks about a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset, right? And I read that book about 4 years ago, and it helped me to establish who I want to be, right? And I believe that having a growth mindset is perfect for individuals who are inside of the pre-sales community. One of the things that we have to be cognizant of is that technology is evolving at a clip that's so fast that no human being is able to be a top of it all. So I think what you have to do is you have to focus the technology or the scope that you are going to focus on as a whole. You have to focus in and narrow in on that one thing that you want to be an expert at. And there's many different ways that you can do that. YouTube University is what I call it, right? I can go on YouTube, put in a fuzzy search, and I can get back some information on any particular topic. Like right now, I'm studying, well, what is the edge, right? Because the edge, depending on who you're talking to, and just by being an architect in pre-sales, I was always taught to address the 5 whys, right? So don't stop at that first or second why. You got to get down to that third and that fourth why, and then you will understand what the problem is, right? So a lot of people, because they don't have a growth mindset, look as change as a challenge versus looking at change as an opportunity. So I see it as an opportunity to go and learn something new, right? And one of the things that I would say, my customer is very focused on what is their business, right? I'm not going to be able to rock up inside of their office and tell them how to run their business better, right? But having an understanding of their business, I could always be on the lookout to understand, well, can I help Joe solve that problem by bringing in this technology, whether or not if it's going to be RPA or if it's going to be an opportunity so that he can develop that intimacy with his customer by introducing some artificial intelligence or machine learning. Because as John Kerr said it, I have three things that I'm helping my customer to do. First one is increase top line revenue. If I'm not helping my customer to increase top line revenue, why am I there, right? Otherwise, I have to help them reduce their operational cost, right? If I'm not helping them do that, the last one that I have to bank on is how am I helping my customer be closer to their customer. So on a daily basis, when I wake up, I read the New York Times deal book just to understand what's going on. And maybe that's going to be an opening to some type of idea, because this is where we are. We're in that idea space where we're bringing ideas to our customers. And if our company has a solution that solves that problem, I get ink on paper. So I would say that, being able to have the correct mindset of going in and seeing change as an opportunity, right? You will always be good in this role, because I think for many of us, we don't like to be in that box. We don't like to come in and do the exact same thing every day. One of the things that I'm most impressed with about my job is the fact that I'm talking to my different customers and they have such different problems that no day is the same. So every day I get to start all over, brand new, and solve another new problem. So I would say embrace change, right? And see change as an opportunity for growth.
That's so great. You both really touched on a lot surrounding mindset. Damon, you first saying you need to be energized and excited and really want to be there, because then you're bringing your most authentic self to all of these conversations. And Lee really hammering it home to say, after you've hit that threshold, what can you do to ensure that you are fostering that growth mindset to not only be authentic and really solve the challenges of your customers, but be able to think outside the box and understand them in maybe a different way than they've even had the opportunity to look at them. So thank you both. I'm really curious to the answer of our next question, because we're on Zoom right now. I'm sure everyone is feeling Zoom fatigue, but what other tools are you all using within the virtual selling environment? And Sean, why don't we start off with you, and then we'll pass it over to Damon.
Sure thing. So besides Zoom and teleconferencing software, we heavily utilize cloud computing in our virtual selling strategy. And so that can include things like demo environments, hands-on workshops that you might do on a virtual machine in the cloud, or even something as simple as a shared whiteboard session, or even a shared document where, the prospect and I will collaborate, and, we can much more easily kind of pass this data back and forth. Another thing that we've had good results with is using Slack to communicate with prospects during a trial. The engineers love it. They really love not having to pick up the phone. So salespeople take note. You have to interface with engineering teams. They really prefer text and Slack. It's such an easy, low friction way to communicate, and we can pass code snippets and links back and forth in real time without their ever having to pick up the phone or fire up a Zoom meeting.
That's great. I definitely agree with the communication between engineers and our prospects. Sometimes that can absolutely get lost in translation. So trying to figure out, as you put it, the best low friction opportunity for them to communicate is perfect. And I really like that idea about Slack collaboration.
Cool. Sean, so, well, I'll start with the visual collaboration, topic. There's a product we use primarily in the scoping and sort of requirements gathering phase, allows you to sort of shift, virtual sticky notes around and really facilitates collaboration, with prospects as we're kind of getting into the implementation, scoping phase. It's called Miro. But there are a number of tools that offer similar capabilities. We've just had good luck with that one. And so that kind of drives engagement, so you have all these options. And one of the first steps is, okay, folks, here are the things that we heard. Help us prioritize, put those into bucket of must have, nice to have, and not necessary, for example. And people will literally sort of click and drag them around, and then you can, kind of drive engagement that way. It works well for us. Slack, of course, seems to have taken over the world, for better or for worse sometimes. But so one of the things that attracted me about my current role or company is I love the product-led growth approach. And I had heard about this in past lives. I've heard that there's this magical utopia where you build a thing and people will come to you and say, hey, I want that thing, rather than having to operate a big sales machine and prospect. I'm sort of being facetious, but I have to say I'm really excited about the way in which we engage with prospects. We have a shared Slack community, which is public, and when we when someone expresses interest to us, we'll of course talk to them, maybe have a discovery call, and then say, what, let's create a channel to drive collaboration, and it works quite well. That, as Sean said, it sort of drives the engineering sort of preference, away necessarily from live meetings and toward typing, which that's cool. Third and last, there's a product. There's a Dutch company. The name starts with I and ends with T, and I swear Sean didn't put me up to this, but we make use of Instruct pretty heavily for our workshop, capabilities. That, again, I've had experience with Instruct in particular, but I won't advertise and suggest that's the only solution. We've just had very good luck with it, and it's worked well for us. That's a big component of our sales process. So if someone comes to us and says, hey, we love your product, we want to learn more, we want to run a trial immediately, we'll say, okay, that's awesome, fantastic, we're so excited you're interested, let's chat. But hey, we have these public workshops where you can get hands-on experience with the product. Go for it. That's a great way to learn more in a no sort of pressure obligation way. And 80-90% of the time, the people are like, oh, that's awesome, okay, cool, let's go for it. And we cover the cost of infrastructure and all that stuff. So that's really helped substantially as well, provide that hands-on experience, which then might lead to a custom trial or evaluation. So those are the three that come to mind for me.
That's also a great time savings, Damon, for your solutions engineering and consulting team. Having those hands-on workshops, allowing the customer to play around before they get to the stage where they really want to dive in deep, where the SE comes into play.
You got it.
Kayla, before we move on, one tool that I want to add is DoorDash and Uber Eats. Keep people
drizzle,
keep their bellies full, right? So don't forget to use that, because typically we'll be making a call around lunchtime and bringing lunch. That's one of the things that sales folks did. DoorDash and Uber Eats, have it land at their house maybe 30 minutes before the call, get them into that warm, happy space. One of the tools that I added to my toolkit during the pandemic.
It's great, Lee. I love it.
The morning meetings and the Starbucks gift cards often work well as well. So our next question is around what you all think the number one mistake SEs make is when they're really looking to shift their presentation style. Where do you think that friction begins and ends when they're looking to make a change? Sorry. And Lee, why don't we kick it off with you, and then we'll pass it over to Sean.
Well, you as a SE, right? I think that you have to have confidence in your product and what it is that you're delivering. And when you have confidence, not only in the product that you have, but you have confidence in yourself, right? Making the pivot is going to be quite, I'm not going to use the easy word, but you're more adaptable to that change because you have confidence in yourself. So right now as a leader, right, my job isn't to know all that I need to know about the tech, right? My job, that's not my job anymore, right? In order to become a great or better leader, my job is building up my people so that they have the confidence they could go into any room and encounter any situation and win, right? We talk about that technical win is one of the things that we have to have. So I would say being able to pivot, because I remember walking into a room one time and the customer said, "Why are you here?" You replied to the RFP, you weren't down selected. Why are you here? And we left that room with their favor and their entire inventory, right? Just because we were able to pivot on the fly. And that's because we were very confident in who we are and what we brought to the table. And I know I'm a little bit off mark with the question and answer, but I believe it's all about the individual. If the individual has confidence, that confidence is where you have mindset, is where you have that little baby cub, but that baby cub sees itself as a big lion. And when I am able to get my people to feel as though they're that big lion when they walk into the room, I believe that they can handle a fastball at 90 miles per hour, or they can handle that slider or that curveball. So I know I didn't answer the question directly, but I think if a person has the correct mindset and confidence, they will be adaptable to just about any scenario that they encounter. And that's what I am doing as a servant leader, building people up.
Thanks, Lee. I think one of the biggest mistakes SEs make is what's sometimes called the rush to demo. Especially SEs that come from a technical background, it's just so easy to fall back on the thing that you know. And so you dive right in and start showing off buttons and widgets, and instead of doing more discovery up front, we have to break ourselves of that habit. I know I did, because I was a technical person, and at first I didn't understand that I can't just show them the software and kind of say, there, give me money, right? It doesn't work that way. You really need to understand, first of all, is there even a sale here? Because engineers love new tech. They'll watch a demo all day long, and then you get to the end and they go, yeah, we have no budget though. And so you just wasted your time, right? And so before diving down into the technical details, you really want to make sure you ask those fundamental questions. What problem are you trying to solve? What drew you to our product or solution? And do you have budget to solve this problem? Then, you can do even more technical discovery before rushing to do the demo. Now you can, come much better prepared for the demo, maybe even customize it a bit. So my advice to pre-sales engineers would be to learn to ask a lot of questions, work with your sales rep, develop a cadence for your meetings, and always leave at least 5 to 10 minutes at the end of the meeting so that you can review and plan the next steps.
Agreed. I think that rushing to demo is often a challenge as well between the sales rep or account executive and solutions engineer dynamic. They're usually, in my experience, rushing to always demo. We have to get the product in front of these people as soon as possible. Like you said, Sean, if we show them the product, they will give us money. Oftentimes that's not the situation. So we do want to make sure that we're qualifying every single opportunity that we have before we jump into the application. Will also allow you to give a better demo as you continue down that path.
Hey, Kayla, really quickly before we drive off, there's a PreSales Collective guy. You guys may have heard of him. His name is Chris White, and he wrote a fantastic book on the six habits of a highly successful engineer. If I'm messing up the title, but Chris would love that what Sean said, and also to pivot over to what John Kerr said, is there's a reason why God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth, do more listening and less talking. That's where you're going to be able to understand what your customer is wanting. And the last bit is the lost art of qualification. I'm not a salesperson, right? But the lost art of qualification. Do you have any budget, Sean? Can you buy what I'm selling? No, I'm at the door.
Absolutely. And it looks like we have some great engagement in the chat surrounding exactly this point. So our last question today, and I will allow everyone to give a quick response, starting with Damon, passing to Sean, and then finishing off with Lee, would be, do you feel that there is more value in innovation or repetition to lead to success?
Innovation for me. I mean, anyone can learn to repeat. You can memorize through rote efforts. I mean, that's not a high value activity. Now, repetition improves on what task you're looking to perfect, but innovation drives interest. It drives economies. It drives human energy, and that's where I'll kind of revert to the product-led growth model a little bit again, because it's so interesting to me and it's so amazing. If you innovate effectively, people will recognize that. You will generate grassroots support and interest in your products and solutions. And so, yeah, for me, hands down, innovation. And then you can polish that through repetition, how you explain it, what process you have around it, but hands down, innovation.
Who was next? I don't remember.
I think it was you, Sean.
Is it me? Okay, that's my cue. I'm honestly kind of old-fashioned in this regard. I feel like if you're getting too innovative in your sales process, you can put the sales pipeline at risk. And you can remember early in the pandemic, there were some pretty goofy things going on because there were all these marketing dollars just sloshing around, looking for somewhere to go. And so we saw swag and like blankets and bathrobes and, like tech, get the AirPods, and we can't call it bribery. It's like an incentive to take my meeting, that gimmicky stuff is okay because, we had to figure out a way to engage with the clients. But sales is still sales, right? And so the fact is there are repeatable processes that have been proven to work. We have, mountains of research. And so I say, why not stand on the shoulders of giants, right? Start with best practice, some known methodology for your sales, and then innovate a little bit, right? Innovate slowly and test every time you innovate. Make sure you can measure the results of sending the bathrobe to the customer. Did it work, right? Did that customer go, I love my furry bathrobe so much that I'm going to buy your product, And so measurable results, innovation, but temper it with some common sense.
That's hard to beat. But when you think about it, right, I say a technology company as table stakes need to be innovating, right? If you're I'm not an Amazonian, right? But I'm a Prime member, right? So shout out to Amazon. But one of the things that I understand that Jeff Bezos did is he made sure that Amazon never became a day two company, because once the company became a day two company, that they were on their road to extinction. And when I'm having this conversation around innovation, one of the things that I like to point out to people is the fact that in 1960, right, companies' lifetimes were about 60 years. It's forecasted by 2025 that the average lifespan of an organization will be between 12 to 15 years, right? So it's that the innovation life cycle is accelerated extensively. So I don't know if it's always going to be an either or type of scenario. If you're in tech, table stakes is innovating, right, at that level. But what I would have to, counter that with is one of the things that made all of the greats great in basketball, and I'll use that as an analogy, is the fact that Michael Jordan used to shoot 1,000 shots in the gym every day. And I could only imagine that Seth Curry is shooting about 3,000 shots a day, because not only is the guy a threat at half court, right, but he's a threat anywhere on the court, which has also changed the game. So as a technologist working for a technology company, innovation is going to be table stakes, but I would say practice makes perfect, right? And even when you're not in front of a customer, how are you working on your pitch, right? I call it the ABC, your audio business card, something that you're going to have that conversation about. Why are you here? That needs to be something that's perfected. So I think practicing that shot every time you get an opportunity to do so is something that has to be looked at. So innovation is there because table stakes, but practice makes perfect.
I really love all of those responses. I know that practicing perfectly is something that I always try to achieve. It can be hard. You're sitting there and you're rehearsing whatever it might be to yourself, saying, it'd be great if I could tweak this or modify that. And sometimes you're wondering, am I spending all of this time and it's not going to go well anyway? But again, usually if we're practicing perfectly, we do get the desired outcome that we want. And so it sounds like it's really a combination of innovating when the time is right, but ensuring that we also have that repetition to be able to execute accordingly. Now, a few of my personal takeaways from the webinar today is pre-sales engineers and their time is valuable. Just like Sean said, the more that we can save it by automating processes, by innovating specific areas of our sales cycle, the better. And we want to make sure that it's used wisely and that everyone is prepared for each virtual meeting or workshop that you're hosting. And the second would be to learn how to use virtual selling tools effectively and make sure that your web conferencing tools work, that your slide decks and demo environments are ready to go, up to date, can be pulled up on demand. I don't know how many times I've been in conversations where the account executive or the sales rep will completely pivot something we did not plan, and we just have to be ready to spring into action. So ensuring that you do have that readiness and that comfort level with each of those items would be some of the takeaways that I've taken from our webinar. So thank you so much, Lee, Damon, and Sean, for all of your responses. I feel like I learned so much in the last 15 minutes that we've had the opportunity to spend with each other.
Awesome. Thank you, Kayla.
Oh, of course. We're now going to open it up for some audience Q&A, and we did have a few questions in the Q&A box, some of which have been kindly answered by Sean and Damon here. But one out of curiosity for me that was asked by Mike is, do you find that sending recordings to prospects of features is as effective as spending time with them over Zoom, showing them that product to help build that relationship?
I'll just chime in to confirm what Sean said. Generally speaking, no. Look, a recording might be of interest if somebody's very early and just starting to sort of explore and try to figure out what's out there. But to really cultivate interest and on a specific initiative or need, I don't find recordings to be that helpful. We'll use them, if it's like, hey, I got 10 seconds, tell me what you do and give me something to look at later. I'm like, all right, cool. Here's what we do. Go check out these recordings if you're interested. If not, that's cool, very low pressure. But yeah, I find engaging interactively to ask some questions and really try to build a connection and then tailor what you're talking about or tailor the solution you're presenting to what you heard is vastly more effective.
Agreed. And I think that leads us nicely into our next question of how can you really read the audience when they're not responding on camera? I don't know how many times I've been in a demo to all black screens on Zoom with just names and no faces. And I know, Lee, you mentioned it's hard to not be able to respond to that body language. So how do you handle those scenarios?
I would say if you drop in the poll, if you have a poll, what did I say 2 minutes ago? That's the way to make sure that everyone's paying attention. I would say that that's the way that you have to go is you try to get engagement I was talking to a mentee today. One of the things that I requested that he do is that he change his camera position, right? Rather than, having to look down like this, what I did is I purchased a camera and I put it up top so that remember, if I'm remote, I'm trying to connect with my prospect at that point in time, or my customer, right? And I want to give them the feeling that I'm in their eye. We have an eye to eye type of contact. So what I recommended that he did do, and what I have already done, is I've raised my camera up and have proper lighting, and I'm trying to connect with my customer by speaking directly into the camera so that we could probably make that connection over a virtual medium.
Yeah, I agree with you, Lee. I'll chime in here just maybe for 30 seconds. So we had a funny meeting, I don't know, last week or so, and a prospect asked something. I'm forgetting the specifics, but it's something we don't do. And the sales engineer, was reluctant to sort of say, no, we don't do that. And so I kind of nudged in the background. I said, hey, tell them we don't do that. Like, it's okay. And so he did, and he said, well, yeah, we actually don't have that capability. And then there was silence, and I could see him. He was like, he's just started to breathe in to talk, and I said, not yet, not a peep. You just wait. And the silence went on longer and longer, and it was just like, oh no, it felt like an hour, but really it was probably, I don't know, 15 seconds. And then the prospect said, okay, understood. I appreciate your candor on that. That's great. Let's keep talking. So you can sort of force that
and say that's a great idea. Maybe we can take that to our product management team, right? So that they could incorporate it or see if it's something that goes into our offering. But a second point to what was just said is, maybe what we could do is we could have a conversation, because if I'm going to give you a recording, my recording should probably be on my website, right? The reason why I'm here is to help you to break that chasm. And I think most people fail to realize that by the time a customer or a prospect at this point has reached out to anyone, they've done 60% of their research, right? So now I'm answering the questions that they couldn't find out all on their own by Google searches, YouTube, and on our website.
I agree. I think my favorite line when we don't have a feature is, again, great idea. I'd love to bring that back to our product team and see how we may be able to incorporate that in the future. So I definitely agree that that's a good way to diffuse the situation. And again, remind them of all the value that you are bringing aside from this one minor thing that maybe isn't in the product.
Right.
Before we let you go, we'd love to know how we did today, and you'll see a poll being launched momentarily. Let us know how you felt about the webinar and if you will be joining us at another PreSales Collective event. And today's webinar has been sponsored by Instruct. Really, modern buyers want to be in control and receive value as fast as possible. And digital buying experience that qualify, engage, and educate buyers at scale are really vital to the success of your pre-sales organization. Instruct empowers pre-sales to increase productivity, scale activities, and streamline operations. Our sandbox technology enables rapid deployment for demos and supports guided workshops and proof of concepts. Gamification in the form of task-based challenges provides guardrails and guidance to your prospects, and it really allows you to analyze the activity and the data from those virtual selling techniques. Virtual selling has really never been easier than it has with Instruct. Educated buyers enter the sales conversations with more knowledge about your products and feel more motivated to purchase. Thank you, Sean, Damon, and Lee, again, so much for joining us. Like I said, I learned so much during our conversation today. And thank you to all of our participants for joining. We're really hoping to see you next time. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, all.
Happy International Women's Day.
Happy International Women's Day.